there, and welcome to New Visions for Peace. This is the show that brings you information and inspiration for living a peaceful life. I am Sutri Irving, and I am committed to work for peace in our world, for both personal and global peace for all citizens and life on Earth. On New Visions for Peace, I speak with the inspirational authors, teachers, and practitioners who share their ideas, insights, and wisdom that support both inner and global peace. And now join with me as we welcome our next guest on New Visions for Peace. I'm here today with Erin Donley. Erin is a connection queen in Portland, Oregon. She's known for helping businesses and individuals gain respect, rapport, and results with their words. After leaving a successful career as a media sales executive, Erin worked at New Renaissance Bookshop for many years before moving on to create Marketing Your Truth, where she helped hundreds of thought leaders strengthen their sales and authenticity. This led Erin to create her Reveal What's Real TV program, which focused on speaking real truth even when it's uncomfortable and difficult. Today, Erin Donley is a professional speaker and business communication trainer. Companies hire her to boost the skills and confidence of each person in the workplace and to help them realize how much their words matter and how important it is to choose them wisely. Welcome to KBOO, Erin.
Hi.
Hi. I loved looking at your website, and I felt like the work that you do is perfect topic for the KBOO community since we're all about communication here. I think we all could use some help with our communication skills.
Thanks for having me. I'm thrilled
so
to be
glad
here.
You're Yeah. I think I want to start out with the question that came to me when I was looking at your website, and how important is it for us to be aware of the unconscious ways we speak?
Thanks. I think that's a good way to start this off. The question is, how important is it to be aware of anything we do unconsciously?
Right.
And so, the unconscious is often what we cannot see. It's the elephant in the room or our blind spots, our hidden thoughts, actions, and beliefs that affect our outcomes. So by looking at the unconscious ways that we speak, we can start to understand why we might not be getting the respect we want or the results or the rapport that we desire. And from there, we can simply make adjustments. Like, for instance, I don't know if you've ever been on Weight Watchers.
No.
But they the first thing they do is ask you to write down everything that you've eaten.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and it's so eye-opening.
Yeah.
So, I could be cooking dinner and have, 4 or 5 handfuls of chips. Hello, that's 500 calories that I hadn't accounted for.
Yeah.
And wouldn't have even been conscious of.
Yeah.
So looking at the way we speak is a little bit like that. It's always a little jarring and eye-opening and like, oh, I didn't know that.
Uh-huh.
But it's really helpful for us to transition into more of what we want. And, the unconscious is really fascinating, especially when we look at how we speak, because so much of that was formed in our childhood.
Right.
Yeah. So, we might have had a parent who was passive aggressive or condescending, and we've adopted their language thinking that that's the correct way to handle something or someone.
Uh-huh.
And we just go on life blindly thinking, well, that's how my parents did it.
Right.
Or our friends. And this happens all the time in the workplace, too. We mimic how others speak and write, and we actually think it's effective, when in most cases, in some cases, it's not. And so, until we learn how our words are received, we'll blindly go on doing this and expecting others to, just to go along with it. And it's pretty much a losing battle.
Right. How do we become more aware of how our words are being received?
I think just really noticing what the response is and paying attention, like, wow, am I, do I feel disrespected in this situation?
Is that the mirror thing?
Yeah, it's that. And even like, why do we communicate? It's to build rapport with others.
Right.
And so when that's not happening, that's a red flag.
Yeah.
But mostly it's because we're not getting the results that we want.
Right. So if people aren't reacting to you the way you want, then you can be pretty sure you're not saying what you want to say in a way that helps them to understand.
Exactly. It doesn't mean that you're wrong or they're wrong. It just means there's a gap in the communication. And for those of us who like looking at the unconscious, our first job is to take responsibility for our part in that.
Uh-huh. I was actually talking with my girlfriend about this the other day, and it's also how we listen. Things that happen to us as children affect how we listen. So somebody might say something to us that triggers something, and it might have nothing to do with the person that's talking to us, but because there was something about that in our childhood, we don't even hear what they said.
Yes.
Because we're back in our little kid body going, ugh.
Oh, it's so easy to revert, isn't it?
Yeah.
I know. We're all such a work in progress like that. And, listening really isn't taught.
No.
In schools, certainly not in in our families or communities. And so, yeah, it's a skill that a lot of us are really honing. And I think it does affect our communication and how we come across.
And going back to that child thing, in my generation, we were actually told not to talk.
Oh, interesting. And that's a form of communication too.
Yeah, it's like, you're a child. You don't speak until you're asked to speak.
Mm-hmm.
It was like, you're adults. You don't talk around us. But that's not so true for kids in many years, which is good. But there was a segment of history that was like that for everyone.
Yes. And I think, it really kind of broke through with Generation X, and now with the millennials. We were told that we can be anything, we could do anything,
right.
Speak our truth, be authentic. And I think there's a lot of confusion in that as well.
Yeah. So how do you help people gain awareness of how their words are coming across?
Well, first of all, I've realized over the years not to target my trainings to those who are obviously missing the mark.
Uh-huh.
They're often the last to realize or want to change.
Uh-huh.
Like, for example, when I was a marketing consultant, one of my friends took me to lunch and said, I've got to tell you, my sister's website is atrocious and she's completely clueless about this. She's hemorrhaging money. She's, it's awful and my family's freaking out. And he said, we're thinking maybe we could pull some money together to hire you because she needs like an intervention.
Wow.
And I just looked at him. I said, there's no way. I'm not going to work with her.
If
she's not into it. And I think that that's just true for a lot of marketing. It's like, go where there is a desire, not where you're trying to convince someone.
Oh, that's really true for me.
Yeah.
Because I got into the work I'm doing because I saw so much suffering around me. And those people aren't interested.
No. No.
Not that I don't care and respect everybody around me, but, people come to consciousness and change in their own time, and
Exactly.
That took a long time for me to understand.
Yeah. So I think that this is so appropriate that we're having this kind of conversation, because it does take a certain level of self-awareness and understanding of others, and
some of it is talking to people who want to listen to your audience kind of thing.
Yes. Yeah.
Smart.
So those that find me and hire me are often already strong communicators.
Oh.
And I really like that. They're typically viewed as role models in the workplace or in their communities or their families. And, they have that thirst for self-improvement. And so usually, how I help them gain a deeper awareness is that it's so easy to start off with like, well, what annoys you about others?
Oh.
Like, tell me what your communication pet peeves are, and, what can't you stand about the way others communicate?
Interesting.
And it's a great way to open the door to what we can't see with ourselves. And from there, we start to ask, well, what can I do about that?
Uh-huh.
And it's a really great way because, it's so much easier to look outside of ourselves.
Yes.
And I'll give you a good example. I strongly believe that we can teach others how we want to be treated.
Uh-huh.
And so, one of my corporate media clients really gets pissed off when people don't answer questions that he poses in his email.
Uh-huh.
They'll maybe answer one or two when there was 4 or 5.
I find that frustrating too.
Of course, yeah. And so he's continually feeling like a victim, and then he starts really, like shaming and blaming the other person. Oh, what a jerk they were. And so, we just kind of like had to stop a minute and be like, okay, what can you do about this? And so, he, for instance, in his subject line, he would change something to say, 3 important questions for you.
Oh.
Instead of,
So
I was just wondering.
Yeah.
so that that person knows when they're opening it, there are 3 questions. And then he could number those questions in the email so that,
It makes it a little more obvious.
it does. And it makes you're actually doing the receiver a favor.
That's a very simple fix.
Yeah. Yeah. Another fun example is a friend of mine really has a bad reaction to this response that she gets through email. A lot of what I do is about written communication. So we'll talk a bit about that is, there's this, this phrase that people commonly use, since I never heard back from you, ...
Yeah.
And there's a shaming quality in that.
Yeah.
It's a little passive aggressive. And she just goes berserk. Like she wants to just write these people off her list when that happens. And I kind of agree. It's easy to get our hackles up. But yet she really prides herself on the fact that, she's not attached to her email inbox and that this is a way for her to create healthy boundaries. So she does not want to change. So that's fine. I said, okay, so why don't you create an autoresponder that says, if you need an answer in the next 48 hours, please call me at this number.
Oh.
Otherwise, I'll get back to you then. And so just those little things that we just sometimes don't even think of think of.
Yeah.
And so much of the work that I do is about putting the power back in our hands to affect the change that we want.
Right. I have that circumstance now. Like texting. That happens in texting all the time.
Yeah.
Like I don't get an answer. Like you were making a date with someone and okay, when? And then nothing.
And then nothing.
And then I do
so
definitely feel passive aggressive and want to write something like, well, you didn't respond.
Yes.
I
know. And, I've often tried to think of what's the, the comfortable way to handle that. And sometimes a good response to that is, hey, it looks like our communication dropped off.
Oh, yeah.
And that's just sort of doesn't,
Yeah.
it just, even I could think of times when I've been on the phone with my mother and we're both on our cell phones and it cuts out. My mother says, Erin, I can't hear you. Your phone is screwing, I'm like, Mom, how do you know it's not your phone?
Right.
And then we get in this battle. And so even just those little things like that of, immediately blaming someone else's cell phone when it could very well be your own.
Right.
Oh, it looks like, our communication seems a little jumbled. Or even just taking ownership. I think my phone is a little screwed up right now. Can I call you back on a landline?
Yeah.
And things like that are just simple changes that can make a big difference.
Yeah. Well, I think going back to the idea about awareness of how you communicate, having an awareness that you're being passive aggressive when you do those things, like, why didn't you answer me? That's a first step, I think.
It's so true. I mean, I sometimes feel like I wish I could write a book on passive aggressive communication because we all do it.
Oh, yeah.
It's our natural default, especially as Americans.
Yeah.
And things like texting. I think I heard I think it was Oprah who said she called texting forced intimacy. And I really like that because, where it is sort of right there.
Right.
And it has this immediacy. And it's really easy for the person on the other end to feel a sense of rejection when they don't get a quick response.
Right.
And, we certainly don't know what's going on in the lives of the person on the other end. And I am just as neurotic as the other person when it comes to this stuff.
Yeah. But I have started to become more aware and I've found myself wanting to respond that way. And I'm like, okay, stop that. Yeah. How do you guide positive change with communication?
It's, one of my favorite poets is this guy, David White. Do you know who he is?
I know the name, but I'm not a poet reader.
Well, he does poetry, but he also does a lot about corporate communication. And he has this quote that says, no one has to change, but everyone must have the conversation. And when real conversation occurs, the changes happen naturally. And so I really like that. When I heard that, it somehow justified the work that I do because, I think that what our biggest struggle is how do I have a real conversation here that's going to affect change?
Right.
And real conversations, sometimes aren't positive right off the bat.
Yeah, they're hard sometimes.
Yeah, there's messy and, there's discomfort. But it gets to a place of positivity if it's done right. And like, for instance, one of the ways that I tried to affect positive change through communication was a TV show that I did called Reveal What's Real.
That I watched a few of those. That was pretty. I liked it.
Oh, good. Thank you. Yeah, it was like a 3-year project just to see, how to open uncomfortable conversations. So, we talked about the challenges of monogamy. We talked about, suicide, stage 4 cancer. We did a show about poop.
I liked the one, of course I was naturally drawn to it, but it was about spirituality and everybody always having a kind of a fake positivity.
Yes. Definitely. That was one of my favorite ones, too. And, I wanted to show how we're all kind of stumbling through these conversations, and that just by having them in a vulnerable way will affect change.
Right.
Because it just is like, it's sort of like not acknowledging the elephant in the room or the struggle in front of us. And, if we're going to take what David White said to heart, let's just start a real conversation and allow for disagreeing and allow for different points of view and let everyone pick up from it what they want. And so, what's funny about communication is that, a lot of people associate with others who would rather be lied to than told the truth. And they want, some people just want to pretend like everything's okay.
Right.
And so, there has to be a level of awareness of like, do I keep surrounding myself with these kind of people? And then, breaking free of some of those kind of friendships. And sometimes it's happening in your own family. And, that takes strength, and it takes a level of awareness and practice. And so, this kind of stuff is just like, we're all like a work in progress.
Yeah.
With our with how we're doing it. And I'll give you two kind of fun examples. Two examples, one that was handled poorly and then one that was handled well is, I used to sell radio commercials, and a big part of the job was, establishing rapport with my clients and building relationships. And as a salesperson, I was always felt like a distraction and just kind of a pain in the neck. And so there were a couple clients that I really broke through that, with, and I really enjoyed. And one in particular was this guy who owned an advertising agency. And I went out of my way to really be a good rep for him and, hook him up whenever I could. And we would go over and I'd have 3-hour conversations with him. And I kind of felt like I had done a better job than my peers and really not only selling the station to him, but establishing this really solid rapport. And so one time he didn't put me on this media buy that was just right in the wheelhouse of our demographic. And I was so mad. I just felt like it was the biggest slap in the face. And, and I was young at the time, and I just went off on him.
Wow.
And, in an email, of course, and just told him, like, do you have any idea what this feels like? And I've gone out of my way for you.
Wow.
And who do kind of like, who do you think you are? And you realize, and
bummer.
And not only did I get kicked off the account, but, I'd never talked to that guy, for years afterwards.
That's bummer.
And when I started doing this work recently and I was interviewing a bunch of people about business communication, I thought, I'm going to round back to that guy and see if he'll meet me for coffee. And he did. And he said, the first thing he said to me was just like, Erin, I'll never forget what you said to me. And even though it was sort of like you kind of sprayed me with your truth, he said, it changed the way that I looked at radio reps, and it changed the way that I communicated with them because I saw what it was like from your point of view.
Oh, wow.
And it was so healing.
Yeah.
I think for both of us.
Yeah.
And so, even though we're, like I said, we're a work in progress and sometimes we really screw things up, sometimes positive change does come from
speaking
that.
your truth.
Yeah. But there's a backlash to authenticity also. And so maybe a more positive example of good communication in those situations is that one of the clients I worked with always felt like her clients were sort of, like making their emergencies her problem. That's a really common situation. And she had one guy who was a big paying client for a long time, but then he kind of fell off the map. And one day he emailed her and said, I need this. I really need you to look at this document and get back to me before the end of the day. We're in a crunch situation. Can you do this? And so she called me up and she was just, ticked off. Like, who does this guy think he is? And he obviously doesn't respect me or my time. And, and so she kind of said, can you look at this email that I'm sending him? And it was all about like, yeah, I'll do this for you, but I really want to let you know of, what an inconvenience this is. And I'm putting off other people and, and that is our common default. And so I helped her write this email response saying to him, boy, I'm so glad that you think of me in these important and delicate times. Here are two options is that, I'm willing to rearrange my schedule to get this done for you today. There'll be a 15% increase in my fee.
Oh, nice.
To get that done.
That's smart.
Yeah. And then she said, but if you can buy us another 48 hours, I'll be able to do this for you at my normal rate.
Oh, that's great.
Isn't that great? It's like, so she felt like, again, you can teach others how you want to be treated. That, she didn't even think that guy was going to pay her. Now she's informed him of how she likes to work and how she does work and what she expects in return.
Right.
And he was appreciative.
Yeah.
He said, God, thank you so much. You know what? Yes, I do need you now, and I'll pay the 15%. And then she was thrilled.
Yeah. How smart is that?
I know. It's really a game changer.
Yeah.
And that's why I get so excited about this work, because I think, communication's so dicey and it's really easy to feel victimized. And we're not taught, even in the workplace, how to deal with this kind of stuff.
Yeah. My partner and I do that all the time. If something happens, like there's an emotional response to an email and, we write back, then we both will read it for each other, because I tend to, I need to step back, because I've fired off a lot of emails that were probably not appropriate in reaction, to something that's gone on. So just even pausing and having somebody else read it, because another person doesn't have your emotional reaction, and
that's so smart.
Yeah,
it really is. And depending on our moods, we can read an email a million different ways.
Right.
In one of my trainings, I actually I have an email written out and I give everyone a little script about how they're feeling in the moment, and then I have them read the email accordingly, the exact same email. And it's funny, my boyfriend does this imitation of me reading an email that's attacking, and it's even the way I say "Dear Erin" is an attack. It's just hilarious. And and I've read too that our thoughts go through 10-minute cycles. So that even if you can wait 10 minutes, you can go back and look at something with fresh eyes.
Yeah.
And, I notice on social media, too, I can be very quick to respond to something, and then I'll go back and read it and think, oh, that wasn't even their intention at all.
Yeah.
Or I actually missed a whole line or two of what they were saying.
Right. Yeah. I know. I've a number of times wanted, can I delete that? And I've had to delete things, actually. Okay, that wasn't that good a thing to put out.
Yes, I was so happy when Facebook did that edit button.
Yeah, it was so frustrating before that. It's like, shoot.
I know.
Well, why do you think it's so hard for people to speak our truth?
Yeah, this is a big topic to dissect, and I think really. Maybe if we can just start that, there seems to me to be two kinds of truth. There's truth from your head and truth from your heart.
Oh, yeah.
And so truth from your head is often like a political opinion, or even maybe your religious or spiritual opinion of something. It's more like that whole oh, God, he's so inconsiderate, or she's ugly, or he doesn't care about anyone but himself. And so speaking our truth, for some, comes in that form.
Yeah.
And that's just not, that's not a legitimate truth.
Right.
But truth from the heart is more about, it's not about lies, it's more about what we're withholding. So truth from your heart is, I'm scared. I'm really unhappy in this situation, or I don't want to do this.
Yeah.
Or, I don't want to be around these people any longer.
Right.
And that is, that's really tough because now we go into the topic of vulnerability.
Yeah.
And that really takes some delicacy. It takes reflection and willingness and, most of all, self-awareness.
Yeah.
So, I did a workshop for several years with this woman named Ingrid Kincaid, and she and I really kind of dissected this truth topic. And we found that people fall in one of two categories, that they're either holding back their truth or they are just like letting it rip. Which category do you fall into more?
I do both.
Yeah.
I do both, but I probably more often have just let it rip.
Me too. I'm a let it ripper.
Yeah.
And, and really both are painful.
Yeah.
Both are painful and both can be really ineffective. And so, the best way to speak our truth is to first speak it to ourselves first.
Oh, yeah.
And so this is really, again, where it takes another whole level of, what is my intention right now? And do I actually have a hidden agenda? Do I want to be right in this situation? Am I trying to gain control? Am I doing this for shock value? Do I want this person to feel bad?
Right.
And it's kind of like, there's this saying that what we do not say eventually gets in the way.
Oh, yeah.
And I love that because, even though we can formulate something that's politically or spiritually correct, haven't you ever read something that someone wrote and you're like, oh, God, please, like your anger or your desperation is written all over this, even though you've packaged it in this, acceptable way.
Right.
So it's like getting really clear with yourself of like, okay, where am I at with this?
Yeah.
And it's hard because, we're in this age of authenticity and, I've been in a million business seminars where everyone's just like, well, just be authentic. Just be authentic. It's like, what does that even mean these days? And especially in the business setting where this gets so hard because how do I be authentic but also represent the company and like speak the corporate speak?
Right.
Oh, so, like we're told to be a team player, stay positive and set our emotions aside. And, we actually get rewarded for that in business. And, there's so much too that like we're learning that, sometimes those who swallow their pride are like, actually like, oh, you've actually been of service. And, it's like, oh, wow, thank you for sacrificing yourself for the sake of others.
Right.
That's really lovely. That's so egoless.
But it's not usually.
It's not. It's damaging. So we are, sacrificing ourselves. And we're trying to maintain an image that actually keeps us falsely safe. And when we don't speak our truth, there's also this thing of that, like, well, maybe there's a lesson in this for me to learn, or I have some karma to burn, or the universe is trying to tell me something. And, this is where I just start going ballistic over sort of excessive new age thinking because it's taking away our power and our voice, and it's meant to do just the opposite.
Right.
So, really just kind of watching when we're going back to these defaults of what we're reading in these books and being told. And, another thing is that like society lies to each other constantly.
Yeah.
And especially as women, and I don't mean to pinpoint women because men do it also, but, I was at this, one of those naked lady parties, where everyone exchanges clothes.
Oh,
that's what it's called.
Like,
yeah,
naked lady party.
We weren't really naked, but we all brought unused clothes. And everyone's trying on stuff. And, this one woman tried on this outfit and, she's looking in the mirror and several women are saying, oh my gosh, that just looks so amazing on you. And, it looked awful.
Oh.
It was just so flat out awful, unflattering, not fitting her. But yet as women, we try to, like, I don't know.
Help each other feel better.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And, this is often why I have low tolerance, like at women's networking groups. Everyone's being a cheerleader for each other. And it's just, there's something just yucky about it. Like we can't put our finger on it, but there's something, if someone would have said at that naked lady party, I think we can find something better for you. Let me help you try to find a color that really looks great on you or something. Imagine how much more honored that person is going to feel.
Right.
And so, I really believe that when we speak our truth, others get to as well. And so, you can you can really set the stage for a lot of, resonance and relief and relationships to grow from honesty. But it takes some bravery. And
I was just going to say, how do you get people to get past the fears?
I know.
Like nobody wants to say the emperor's not wearing his clothes.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a hard one. Like you don't want to hurt somebody's feelings.
Yes. And this is where, you're right, because, then there's that whole thing of like unsolicited feedback.
Right.
No one wants that.
Yeah.
And so really it's just, like, hey, I'm willing to offer some feedback on that. Or would you like to hear some of my observations?
Give somebody an option to say yes or no.
Exactly.
No, I don't want to hear what you have to say.
Right. I mean, they often don't say that.
Yeah.
But then it's up to us as the receiver to realize that what is true for one person is not necessarily true for us.
Right.
And that if we've allowed that we can accept it or not. And, no one can really shame us. We're the only ones that can shame ourselves.
Right. But don't you think we do a lot because we were shamed?
Right. Yes.
I mean, we have that conditioning.
We really do. This is such a human, messy, believe me, communication. I don't know how I got into this field. Right. I mean, it is there, I hate to say there are rules because, there aren't, and everyone's coming at it with just such different background and programming. It's really hard to know. I
was thinking that, even the idea of being vulnerable, to put yourself out there to express what you're thinking is difficult because people, we protect ourselves. Like, we were hurt or whatever. And so we have this huge layer of sort of processes of protection.
Yes. That
you have to somehow get through to have a real conversation.
I know. And, this is really, I frequently unfriend people on Facebook.
Oh, wow.
Because I really want to be selective about who I keep in my friend circle.
Yeah.
I want to sort of walk that talk.
Yeah.
And so I think really, surrounding yourselves with others who enjoy real conversation and actually appreciate it, it is something that it's one of the best gifts we can give ourselves.
Yeah.
And, for instance, this weekend, one of my Facebook friends said something like, I've read every self-help book known to man. I practice gratitude. I give meaning in life. I'm passionate. Everything has meaning and purpose. She was kind of going through the whole list. Yet I feel completely broken and devastated. And I just feel like, what is wrong with me? Because all this stuff that I'm doing is not working. And so if you were to say that in front of a group of people who are only positive,
right,
they would smother you with, suggestions.
Oh, you're not so bad.
Oh, what do you get? Oh, just,
you seem fine.
Just put on a smile and realize, And instead, it generated the most beautiful conversation.
Wow.
I mean, the things that came back to her were some of the most healing things.
Oh, that's great.
I've ever seen. And everyone sort of, again, when you speak your truth, you give people permission to speak theirs. And so there was all of this, like, I know exactly how you feel.
That's always good too.
Yes. And, and then others were able to say, from my experience, and that's such a good thing too. It's not just like about trying to give advice to everyone. It's always like, I'm certainly not you. And I don't know all the details of your experience, but when I felt this way, here are some of the things I've tried, and then it's kind of a win-win.
Yeah.
And, so it's really, I think, up to us to, kind of realize like where can we surround ourselves with authentic, real conversation people, and and where do we, like, sometimes often at work we just can't.
Right.
And so you can choose to stay there, but then being an everyday victim of that is going to pay a price. So you're going to have to change your thinking around that.
Right.
And accept that, this is just not the place that I do that, and that I can't go home pissed off every day because of it, because I've made this choice to stay. And so, it's just kind of one of these things. And I think this, with, like I said, there's a backlash to authenticity, and it often means, being really selective about who we allow in our lives, and also realizing that people are going to totally disagree with us.
Right. Yes.
It makes me laugh when I worked at New Renaissance Bookshop for several years. And one of the most popular items that we sold were those coexist bumper stickers.
Oh, yeah.
And many of those people were, diehard liberals, Democrats,
yeah.
and they wouldn't be caught dead in the same room as a bunch of Republicans.
Right.
But they're driving around town with their Cokes.
Coexist, yeah. Except if you're Republican or, yeah, because you don't really see a, little Republican symbol on that.
You don't, no.
That's so funny.
And so, I think too that, a part of this awareness is realizing that, I'm speaking as my true self, not to get people to agree with me, but to just show up as who I am. And also, learn that there's this thing of, like, we have to get better at dealing with other people's disappointment and disagreeing. And that's really hard, I think, for most of us, especially, like we said, it goes back to our childhood.
I was just going to ask you, like, how do you help people listen without taking it personally? Because I think that's what happens. Mm-hmm. Like, we hear something, we take it personally, even if it's not meant that way. And then we react hurt.
Yeah.
Or whatever.
Yeah, you know what? I know that, and this is just one of those things I think where we're all just kind of a work in progress. And I had a woman who felt that I was being judgmental and negative in my communication, and she said, kind of like wrote me this scathing email about, you're better, you're not better than anyone else, and who do you think you are, and your negativity is blah blah. And I was just like, oh, and I actually lost a little sleep over that. And then I realized that, my communication was affecting something in her.
Yes.
It was something that I was saying that was just kind of poking at something deep and hurtful in her.
You poked the bear.
I did. And, if she would have said to me, boy, Erin, some of these things that you're saying are really triggering me.
Yeah.
And I'm actually feeling like my feelings are hurt and I'm starting to get really self-conscious.
Right.
Then I would have like been like, whoa, okay. Let's just talk about that because, my truth might not be your truth.
Yeah.
Like we could have kind of come to a better place with it, but it is our default and we're taught to just attack.
Yeah, we are. Defend ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
We live in this competitive world and defend America, defend ourselves, defend our country. It's defense.
I know. Yeah, this is why I just really, with, Occupy Wall Street and protests, I just feel like they're useless because we're just like out there angry, pissed off, calling people wrong. There's got to be a better way to do it. It seems really outdated to me.
Right.
And just, it's like the war on this, the war on that.
Right.
And, is that wording really perpetuating the division or is it actually creating a, unity?
Well, there's a pretty strong Occupy community within KBOO. And one thing I learned out of that actually is, at least here in Portland, there was a lot of actually unifying organization that came out of that. And, to make new community gardens and to find new ways to find housing for people. And so there was actually some good stuff, at least here in Portland, some really good stuff that's come out of that.
That makes sense. Yeah. So like the big mission might not have been accomplished, but there was good that sprang from
continued to come out of that. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I think too, like a lot of those things that, are, like you said, are just about bringing people together who feel the same way and might be able to affect change in different areas.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
I don't know if we've already talked about this, but what are some of the biggest mistakes that we make? Or, and I think I do this, like, how do we sabotage ourselves? Even the way I try to communicate about the work I'm doing.
Yeah, I'm writing a book right now called The No Bullshit Guide to Business Communication. I really like taking these conversations into the business realm. And so I can kind of pull up my scroll right now of mistakes. And truly, I want to say that I learned most of these were learned from my own pain of doing it.
Yeah.
And from, I've just done endless interviews with those. And so here are some of the biggest things I think that happen is that, we're trying to be nice to each other. Everyone's trying to be nice, nice. And really, if you look back into the origins of the word nice, it's translated as ignorant and stupid.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Wow.
And so it's kindness is what we're after.
Yeah.
And so, niceness is kind of about,
fake.
swallowing your pride, fake forced positivity, showing up, in this politically correct, spiritually correct way.
Yeah.
And so, coddling others, exo heart, all this little stuff. And so, just really being conscious about, am I trying to build this facade of a nice person, or could I actually express what I want to say in a kind, compassionate way that will, get us to another, level of friendship or, business. And so that's a big one.
Before you go on, how do you, I guess I want the answer to that. How do you get into a kind, compassionate...
You know what? It goes back to what we talked about earlier of getting really clear about what's my intention and what I'm trying to say here.
Yeah.
Am I trying to get some control? Do I want to be right? Do I want to be viewed in this certain way? Am I affecting my words, or am I packaging my words in this calculating way to be seen in a certain way?
Right. Or even just what you think that person wants to hear. I think a lot of times we say what we think someone wants to hear.
Totally. Yes, thanks for that. That's well said.
Yeah.
So, does that answer that one sufficiently? Another thing is that there was this picture that I saw online, and it had a girl kind of with giving two middle fingers in the air up on this mountain, and it said, even if no one agrees, speak your truth. And, I can understand where that kind of advice comes from, but isn't the point of communicating to actually build a bridge,
right?
And to gain some understanding. And so I think too that there's this whole thing of again, get really clear. Why am I saying this? Am I saying it just to spew my truth onto everyone, whether they want it or not?
Well, I think, and I think it's interesting that you're working in the corporate world, because in my impression, of corporations and even politicians is they're not really trying to build a bridge. They're just trying to make people believe what they believe, or make people do what they want them to do. And they don't really care about having an interaction.
Right. Yeah, there's so much manipulative language in politics.
Yeah.
I can't stand it. Even from both sides.
Yeah.
I just, I've traditionally been more on the Democrat side. And this last election just sickened me, because all of the speeches were just so carefully crafted.
Yeah.
And we just ate it up.
Yeah.
Ate it up. And I was like, come on, wake up. These are, it's I think Obama's speech writers were some of the best, script writers on TV or something.
Yeah.
It was just, So I think that, I want to start a revolution of conversations that are meant to, really and truly build that bridge.
Yeah.
Another big thing that happens every day, and again, we're taught how to do this mostly from our parents and those around us, is that to really take a look at the white lies that we tell.
Uh-huh.
And
what do you mean? I don't tell white lies.
You mean you're really not going away for the weekend if I want to come over? So, for instance, I once contacted this guy that I really like who does business storytelling, and I wanted him to participate in an article that I was writing. And, of course, I wanted to be seen by him. I wanted him to do, and so I was asking him to be part of this project, and he emailed me back right away, and he said, Erin, thank you so much for thinking of me and reaching out. I just want to tell you, I simply don't even have the bandwidth to go there right now and do this. And what a perfect, simple, succinct way to say no. And I felt not only honored, but I was, he could have just not replied.
Yeah.
He could have said, oh, I'm so busy right now.
Right.
It's
I don't have time for you.
Right. And so that's another thing, that whole, I'm just so busy right now. I just can't do that.
Yeah.
And we've all seen that "stop the glorification of busy" quote out there, which is so nice, because I'll tell you what, we're all busy.
Right.
But if, Oprah arrived on my doorstep and wanted to interview me, or, or I got to go on the Today Show, I would not be too busy to do that.
Right.
Or if someone
choices.
important
Yeah.
wanted me, I would make time. So this whole thing of I'm busy is just total, it's kind of an insult.
Right. I know that I've actually said I'm busy to people and had a sense of importance around it. Oh, I'm busy. I have things going on, which can be a slap in the face to someone. Like,
'Cause really
how am I
everyone
not
just-
a part of that?
Yes, and really what we're
know?
looking for is just like we all want to be significant in each other's lives.
Yeah.
So that whole I'm busy is a bit dismissive.
It is completely.
And even if you could say like, I have said, when I was invited to maybe like a barbecue or a party on the weekend, again, thank you so much, acknowledge, thank you for inviting me. And then, this weekend, I'm just dying to sit around and play with the dogs and watch TV.
Right.
I'm really needing a weekend like that. I hope you understand.
Yeah.
I mean, the thanks that you get from things like that.
Right. Just being honest.
Yeah, people really, again, you'd be really surprised. And if
Yeah.
you have a friend who wants to get mad about that, are they really your friend?
Yeah.
Here we go.
Yeah,
Like, let's be selective again. And, even just like so much of what we do, I think we do this like out of this obligation.
Yeah.
And especially, in this kind of like entrepreneur world, we all want to be like scratching each other's back and helping each other. And, this one woman that I really look up to invited me to one of her networking gigs right after Christmas. And I mean, I just like the last thing I wanted to do was go.
Yeah.
But I wanted her to know that I like her and I support her.
Uh-huh.
So, I emailed her back and said, I'm so burned out from the holidays. And I'm just not wanting to go to this, but I want to support you. How else can I support you right now? And she said, wow, I just wrote this article. Would you be willing to post it on your, social media channels? Nice. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Whew, score. I didn't have to go to the party and she's looking at me favorably.
Yeah. Cool.
So, it's just these little things like that. So white lies are a big thing.
Uh-huh.
Should I go on?
Yeah.
Okay. And, we've talked a lot about this, but it's really like the biggest thing right now is this, fake and forced positivity.
Yeah.
And I saw today online this one guy that said, well, somebody unfriended me and said, that they were, leaving my social networks because I was too positive.
Wow.
And all these people are just like, well, screw him. And, you don't need negative people in your life. And so I just had to jump in, of course. And I said, I think what he's responding to is that, there's a bit of a backlash going on around positivity right now. And that we all know that no one's happy 24/7.
Yeah.
And when that's the only thing that we're projecting, it makes our happiness seem inauthentic.
Yeah.
And so where that guy was perhaps wrong is to email the person and say, I want to let you know I'm unfriending you because you're too positive. That's a personal attack right there.
Yeah.
He didn't need to say that.
Right.
He can have whatever beliefs he wants.
Yeah.
But, so it's just, especially in the workplace, it's like, hey, how you doing today? Oh, fantastic. Couldn't be better.
Yeah.
You hear people say that all
Fine.
the time.
I'm fine. How you doing? Fine. I say fine all the time.
Right. And, one thing I learned at working at New Renaissance, the owners, Jamie and Darlene Potter, are really great communicators. And they were one of the first to sort of communicate this sort of, because they're very positive people. But I remember one time where I could just see that like Darlene didn't get much sleep the night before and was really dragging, and kind of said to her, hey, how you doing today? Expecting her to be fine. And she said, you know what? I'm going through some stuff, but I'm working through it.
Wow. Yeah.
And I just thought that was
good.
very lovely.
Yeah.
I'm working through it.
I just recently had this reading where my question was, how do I stay unconditionally loving and aware all the time? And it's just like, well, that's not going to happen while you're in your physical body, because we live in this world that there's change, there's upsets, there's
death,
there's people close to us, things that we can't control, and so that's not going to happen. And then it was like, don't beat yourself up if you can't be positive all the time.
No,
like give yourself a break. So that was actually very good for me to hear.
How validating is that?
It was very validating.
I love that.
It's kind of exactly what you're saying.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's a great example. And, so I think just really kind of watching our excessive positivity, it's tending to turn people off right now.
Yeah.
We've kind of, the pendulum has swung.
Right.
And so that doesn't mean that you just sort of, like, well, I'm pissed off at that and I can't stand these people. It's not about saying those things. It's just about acknowledging, I'm going through a rough time
Yeah.
right now, and I'm working it out.
And I think it makes you more real in people's
Yeah.
lives,
Yeah. Yeah, another thing that I like to look at written communication and some of the mistakes that we make there. And, they say that something like, statistics are showing that 80 to 87% of all business communication is now happening online.
Right.
So now we're forced with this, how do we put our thoughts into writing?
Right.
We're just not taught how to do that. So what's happening is that we're using a lot of these emoticons, smiley faces and winks and things like that. And so this is where people start really get angry at me. So I want to package this conversation delicately, because it's not about not using those. I think it's just about, again, taking a step back and asking, why am I using that? And so, am I using this smiley face heart XO because I want to be viewed as loving and nurturing? Am I using this smiley face because I want to be seen as, something that as positive? When in fact that, maybe instead of using the smiley face, you could simply say, boy, your words really made me smile. Thank you.
Yeah.
That carries a whole different tone than just a smiley face. So it's just something to experiment with. It's not like it's wrong or whatever, but especially, especially the wink, that's a really popular one. Well, how am I going to convey that I'm just joking if I'm not using the wink?
Right.
Well, why don't you try packaging your words differently? Why don't you try saying it differently? So we're actually getting kind of lazy in our written communication and slapping on these emoticons, when in a professional setting, it's actually viewed as unprofessional.
Right. I've been doing that a lot lately.
Who hasn't? We all have. But I think the big thing that really needs to be axed, especially from business communication, is LOL.
Yeah.
There's this constant, I received an email that had LOL 5 different times.
Wow.
And I think it's actually, it's our insecurity. We want to show that we're being laughing on the other end, or that, we didn't mean this in a harsh way. So we use these things, but they're not, again, it's like one of these things, it's not getting the results that we want often. It's just something to be aware of and to play around with.
Yeah.
So it's just not for everyone. And, that goes with, the cliches too, that we're really commonly using right now and seeing. The big one is just saying.
Oh, yeah.
I'm just saying. There's a little passive aggressive to that.
Yeah.
If you're just saying, why can't you just say it then?
Yeah.
So it's tricky. And,
because that leaves an inference up to the other person. Like,
why didn't you know that?
Right.
Or, I don't know, how do you interpret that?
I'm like, well, you should get what I'm saying. It's obvious what I'm saying, because everybody should know this kind of a thing. And maybe that's not true.
Yeah. I emailed a friend a question, and they emailed me back, and then they posted on Facebook their response to me, and then put just saying, and then all these people were and saying truth and say it, and I was like, what the heck?
Yeah.
So I heard you the first time.
Yeah.
Why did you have to just say it again?
Yeah.
So it's just something to notice. And, with that, we often also pull out these cliches. Again, this is so common in written communication of saying, I'm sorry, but I know you're busy, but, it's just
going to say what I want to say anyway.
Yes. And so, why apologize? We're used to excessively apologizing and, things like that.
Because we're insecure.
Of course.
Yeah.
We're all tender in our own ways.
Yeah.
And
I say I'm sorry to someone if they bump into me in the store.
I know.
If they bumped into me, I'm always the one saying I'm sorry.
And it's just being polite, really, and considerate. So.
Well, I think it is, but I also think, there's some level of insecurity in that, or there's something wrong with me a little bit. That I haven't quite cleared.
Especially as women, we're constantly saying, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, and apologizing. And I think that, we really can gain a lot of respect in the work world by just really, and maybe not even saying like, I'm sorry, but I really apologize.
Right.
There's a little bit more power in that. Or I apologize.
I read that somewhere. It's much better to say, I apologize for this, but rather than saying I'm sorry, because I don't remember why, but it's a better...
It just feels better, doesn't it? It's coming from a place of strength.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so, also with written communication, I think the biggest thing that's such a challenge for most of us is that, it's said that brevity is a sign of respect.
Oh.
And so, we're so used to sending, really lengthy emails that because we want to make sure we get across all of our points.
Hammer it in.
And so, really kind of just getting straight to the point and just being able, I read an article that said like the number one email that top executives never send. And I couldn't wait to open it up. Yeah. And it was all about they never send a long email.
Oh.
And the comments were just explosive. People were just, how dare you say that? And, I read long emails and sometimes I appreciate the effort that people take. But, when it comes down to it, especially in the business world, why not just say it quickly? I mean, we're all overloaded in our inbox.
Oh, half the time if I get a long email, I don't read it for days.
I know. And then how do you respond?
It's like, oh my God, this is a really long email. I can't deal.
Where do you even begin with a response, too?
Yeah.
It's really difficult. So it's truly a sign of respect. And I think that that's another way that we need to kind of reprogram our thinking. Mm-hmm. And, I've often, when I work with clients right up front, I'll say, I want to let you know in our email communication, I'm not going to be coddling or asking about your weekend or, I'm going to be really to the point because I respect your time and mine. Yeah. So if at any point you feel like I'm coming across harshly or your feelings are getting hurt in any way, please pick up the phone and call me and we'll talk about it.
Yeah.
And so, just even sort of setting that stage and expectation can really help.
I think there's something about the speed in which we can communicate these days with email. Mm-hmm. Like, even in business, like it used to be done through the mail. And there would be a lot of time lapse in between. Now, like, you get something, you read it, you react, you fire something back, and maybe that's not always the best way to go about it. Maybe, like you said earlier, taking 10 minutes.
Yeah, or even just to say, hey, I've received this. I'll get back to you later today.
Right.
Because that's all the person wants to know in a lot of situations is that they have been seen and heard.
Right. And that's a really good thing to do with a long email. Mm. I'll try to remember that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, it's like it's one of the biggest time wasters going on in the corporate world is we're having to formulate these long emails and respond to the long emails that we get. And there's disappointment on both ends. And there's a lot of time and money being wasted. And, we're wondering, did I come across as I intended? Uh-huh. And, more than anything, it's like emotional energy.
Right. There's something about, I was just thinking when you were saying that, there's something I do like about email in that, for me, I feel like I have more time to formulate my thoughts in writing than I do if I was to pick up the phone and have a conversation. I don't know if that's true, but
it's so common.
I feel more confident with writing than I do with
the same. Yes, I think that's really valid too, and I know we want to give it some like careful thought. Before we, just. Yeah, and it's interesting. I was at a business conference where there were some executives from Nike on a panel, and a lot of people, like a theme was, just pick up the phone, and someone finally said to these Nike guys, well, what do you prefer? Do you prefer someone just picks up the phone, and every single one of them said, I never pick up my phone. If you want to get my attention, you got to send me an email first.
Yeah.
I was like, see, we're all doing it. Yeah. So this is the challenge that we have, especially in the workplace right now, is that, I teach a personal email writing process where we look at everything from the name that, making sure that your name is spelled correctly in the two, like it's not just your business or some nickname, but it's, your Sutri, and then it's and then your subject line is so important.
Yeah.
Then there's the visual appeal of your email. Is it like all one big long paragraph?
Or it broken up into...
Is it broken up?
Yeah.
What is your opening? What is your closing?
Oh.
What's your email signature?
Oh.
Are you starting off with your immediate request instead of like, we all do this, is that we kind of background at the end of the email. So do you want to have lunch next week? And it's just, that can easily get, it's just overwhelming, and then someone might not get to the point. So just really, and oftentimes, working with a lot of people in their marketing and like blog writing and article writing, it's often the same thing, is that they'll write all this stuff and the point will be at the very end. So I often just circle that. Okay, let's pluck that and put it right at the beginning. And so the reader can then pick up the main point and then decide from there how much more they want to spend with it. So yeah, it's interesting. The personal email writing process is really just eye-opening and confidence boosting. And
so you could also help people with their blog writing.
Yes, that's what I traditionally have done before I started this business communication training.
Oh, because it's such a big thing now, doing blog writing, and help with that would be good.
Oh yeah, it's really crucial. And when I worked at New Renaissance, I wrote a weekly column for them where I was like the eyes and ears of the store, and I got to talk about books and products and so on and so forth. And I would not be allowed to send off that email unless at least 3 people read it.
Oh, cool.
And so it was really hard because I would be so attached to my words and the time that I put into it. And I had to accept critical feedback and make adjustments. It wasn't my store, Right. I was only the voice of the store. And so I really learned the importance of getting feedback before we put anything out there. And I also learned how to give it myself. And so it's so crucial. And I think a lot of us, especially with writing blogs, we spend so much time doing it and just then get opinions from other people.
Right.
Oh, God. Then you got to go back and change it.
Yeah, then you feel crushed. What do you mean I wrote that wrong?
Right. What do you mean you don't understand?
Right.
It's really hard. And I mean, even just this week, I wrote a blog and I must have spent 8 hours writing it, and I sent it to one of my mentors, and she just tore it apart.
Oh, bummer.
And, and she kind of said, I just get this feeling that you were angry about something and trying to package it as a lesson in this. And at first I was like, oh, what? But I was, I was like, I had a proving tone to it. And I was trying to make a point about something that I didn't feel was right. And, and that comes through. And so, it's really, I think oftentimes we send them to maybe our friends or our family and they say, oh, way to go, honey. That sounds great. Good for you. Well, is it really going to be good for me? Potentially not.
Yeah.
So getting feedback from someone who, is skilled in looking at these nuances is really valuable.
Yeah, completely. I think this goes good segue into my next question, which is, how can our words be a source of motivation and action?
There's one main thing I think that I'd like to say about that is, again, when I worked at New Renaissance, I wrote that column every single week for almost 6 years.
That's a lot.
It was a lot. And every week I got to see how my words affected others, because I would, first of all, they had the choice to unsubscribe or not. So I would see, the unsubscribes that come in. But more than anything, I would see, did this book sell that I just featured? Are people signing up for this event or not? And so I really kind of started to learn, okay, how can I package my words to really motivate these people into action? And there was one big thing that I learned is that I noticed that, like, when I first started writing, I would say, do you want to live the life of your dreams? Do you want to do this? Do you want to do, I found that if you do blah, 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 using that word, you, there was something about it that put me on a pedestal that I had somehow figured it out, and I was trying to teach others how to do that. And so that worked fairly well for a while, but then one day I switched it to we. We're at a time right now where we're hoping to do this, and we just feel that we, or whatever. Or I would say I'm faced with this. So you taking away the word you and then replacing it with we and I was such a game changer, Sutri.
Yeah.
I couldn't even believe it. Sales would go through the roof because all of a sudden I was walking shoulder to shoulder with these people, which I truly was all along.
Right.
But I was just following the way that most people speak.
Yeah.
And, I notice this every day, both on social media and, it's just even like watching, again, I keep mentioning Oprah, but some interview with her and Cameron Diaz. And, Oprah said, so, what's your philosophy on this, this, and this? And she said, well, I found that if you do this and if you do that. And I was like, wait a minute, are you talking about me? Because she just asked about you.
Right.
And this happens all the time on social media, especially, we'll get posed a question, how do you feel about this? And then people respond with, well, I found that if you do this and you do that,
Right.
there's something sketchy about it. Take ownership for our own words. Yeah. And if you're kind of leading a charge, use that word we, like, or let's do this together. Our, yes.
Yeah, I've been more conscious of that recently too. Mm-hmm. Just in the whole, I've done a couple interviews with people who are into oneness. Mm-hmm. And having done those, it made me more conscious of that's saying you is very separating. And if you say we or our or even I, it's more inclusive. Yeah. You build that bridge.
It's so true. And it's such a simple twist of wording that can make such a difference.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the biggest one, I think, to remember.
That was good. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to ask, why is it that good, clear communications are so important for our own well-being and peace and success?
Yeah, I know that is kind of a big question. I think, really, okay, so let's talk about that, like both in our lives, like everyday lives, and then in the workplace. And so if we start in the workplace, I think that communication is kind of like the one equalizer. It's the one thing that no matter what position we're in, we can do well or not. Uh-huh. For instance, several of my friends work at a company where the general manager is just one of the most awful communicators I've ever experienced. They're constantly sending me this person's emails and so it's like we can hold this top, prestigious position, but be absolutely hated for the way that we speak,
right.
and write.
Yeah.
And so it's like our communication is so important to our success in that way that, it's like how we're perceived. How, what is our ability to affect change and motivate people? And, and then I think like in our personal lives, one of my friends was telling me that her mother had passed away and her mom was this great cook and she cooked all the time for her brother. And so she said that she stepped into this role of cooking all the time for her brother and that, she just took it on to do this all the time and it made her feel so good. But he never said thank you or never said like, God, that was really great meatloaf that you made, or, oh, I just love when, And so instead of confronting him on that or expressing how much she would love to hear his feedback on it, she stopped making him food, felt really angry at him. Uh-huh. She loved to cook.
Right.
And so now she was denying herself something that made her feel good, that like put her in touch with her mother and her brother.
Right.
Instead, she chose to stay silent and now doesn't want to speak to her brother. Her brother doesn't understand what's going on. Right. And, so again, this clear communication is so important for our well-being because whether we're spewing our truth on people, whether they want to hear it or not, or we're staying silent, there's pain in that.
Yeah.
And if we go back to that, what we do not say eventually gets in the way,
yeah.
That can also affect our health.
Yeah.
And our sleep and our relationships. So maybe that's just the easiest way to say, like, clear communication is a big deal.
And I think also there's that thing of what you don't say, that if you're stuffing something, then that's going to bubble up somewhere in an inappropriate way.
Yeah. Yeah, we've all been there, huh?
Completely.
I know.
So yeah, I think, and also the bridge building. If we can be more honest, you're right. It really makes it possible for other people to do that too. Like if you're modeling that as a way of communication, then other people, well, if they can say that, then maybe I can, express myself also.
Yeah.
more freely.
Yeah, there's a great book that I really like called Saying What's Real, and it's by, I think it's Dr. Susan Campbell. And it was one of the best resources that I found for like how to open difficult conversations. There are lots of people who are doing communication work out there, and but I find that it's kind of formulaic, like Marshall Rosenberg's nonviolent communication. Great stuff. But I can tell when someone's pulling a Marshall Rosenberg on me because it's so like, and I just want to be like, can you just speak like a real person? It doesn't. And again, for the average person, it might be fine if, they're using that technique. But, also other business communicators, I've read tons of business communication books. And again, it's all about swallowing your pride and forced positivity. Slap on the smiley face. Don't ever show how you're really feeling. And boy, it's tricky because in a sense, we do have to do that in some situations, but and others being honest, can really lead to more lasting relationships and a more lucrative, business venture.
Yeah. Well, also I think in a business sense, people would trust you more if you were honest than if they felt like they were just feeding you a line.
Yes.
Yes,
one of my favorite clients, when I worked in radio, I could actually call her up and say, okay, they're giving us this sales package to pitch this week. I don't think it's perfect for you, but I would love if you can just look at it and let me know if this fits any of your clients, and she would just be like, thanks for your honesty. I will, and then instead of me calling her up and slinging her some line of, of what they told me to say, I could just be honest with her, and she's so appreciative of it.
Yeah.
So, and I got the most business from her.
Oh, cool.
Because of it.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just really, it's experimentation. And I think realizing too that like our family dynamics can really screw up how we communicate. And, I know I'm really working on that kind of stuff, and I screw up all the time, and so does everyone else. And just really being gentle with ourselves to realize that at least we have this awareness, and we're trying.
Right.
We're learning.
Yeah. We're in school.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed this conversation, Erin. I before we close, I'd like for you to tell people how to get in touch with you, what your website is, and even maybe describe again a little more what you do.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you. Well, my website is erindonley.com. So that's ERIN DONLEY. It's the short version of Donley. And so there, you'll find a description of my business communication training. So I get hired mostly by sales and management teams, or a marketing team, or any kind of leadership group. A lot of women's groups hire me because, we're really trying to break through in our communication. And so I offer group programs and training where I'll go in and do, ongoing training or a one-time speaking gig. And then oftentimes companies will say, well, then I want you to work specifically with 2 or 3 of these people. And so, that's kind of how that works. And, and I also offer just one-on-one training with people who,
want to be better.
Exactly. Yeah. And then I love like going out and just doing the 30-minute keynote, about business communication and the importance of, building our authentic voice. So, yeah.
And you do the personal email writing process too, which I think, a lot of us could use.
Yeah. And it really falls under, if a company hires me, it's basically what, we always go there. Because again, so much of our writing is happening online. And so that's one of the first places we go is to dissect their inbox.
Cool.
How it's working out.
Well, thank you so much. This has been
you.
Great. I really enjoyed this.
I so appreciate you bringing me on. Thank you.
Hi. Cool. All right. You have been listening to New Visions for Peace, produced through the studios of KBOO Radio, 90.7 FM here in Portland, Oregon, and KBOO.FM on the web. As always, I am very grateful to our guests for sharing their insights, visions, wisdom, and practices for creating peace in our world. And I also want to thank Laura Love for her lively rendition of Put a Little Love in Your Heart. You can learn more about what I do to create and support peace at www.newdirectionsforpeace.com. I look forward to bringing you more inspiration on the next New Visions for Peace.